The goblin, Lin, eyed the succubus lady and asked what she was even doing there. He warned her that if she wasn't going to talk, he didn't have time to waste. The succubus didn't take it seriously at all. She slipped into that smooth, seductive attitude she always carried. She teased him, saying he shouldn't act so cold, and apologized for misjudging him earlier. Back then, she explained, she hadn't realized he'd turned out this hot, so to her it was all just a tiny misunderstanding. Behind them, the Snow Yeti Lord and the Water Demon Lord exchanged confused looks. They whispered to each other, wondering if this was actually the same succubus they knew. She wasn't acting distant or icy like she normally did, and now she was giving all this attention to a goblin. Lin ignored the two lords altogether. He told the succubus that even if it was a small matter, she still needed to explain herself. Before she could answer, the Water Demon Lord shouted at her from behind, telling her to hurry up and accusing Lin of trying to kill them. He even reminded everyone that technically, according to the Grand Tomb's rules, Lin was the one who should have been executed. The succubus suddenly turned on them. Instead of taking their side, she snapped at both lords to keep quiet and kneel before Lin instead of causing drama. And in a blink, without letting them argue, she bent their wills and forced them onto their knees in front of the goblin. Lin took the moment to mention that one of them had threatened to eat him earlier. The succubus didn't even flinch. She casually suggested that instead of them eating Lin should roast the Water Demon Lord over a fire, then make the Snow Yeti Lord eat him instead. That way, she said, the whole mess would sort itself out. Lin just stared at her, realizing she was going way harder than he'd ever expected, especially considering all he had done earlier was throw around nonsense threats. The demon lords trembled, wondering why the succubus was suddenly siding with Lin and turning on them. The succubus told them both to look into her eyes, then firmly added, "You too," making sure they obeyed. The moment they met her gaze, their resistance vanished. Her charm hit so hard they didn't even think of fighting it. With dreamy, love-struck expressions, they agreed to whatever she wanted from them. A short while later, the Snow Yeti Lord was happily roasting the Water Demon Lord over a fire like it was the most normal task in the world. The goblins gathered around, practically drooling as the smell of roasting meat filled the room. The succubus leaned closer to Lin, wondering aloud if this bit of domination was really all he wanted, or if he planned on doing something with her instead. Lin shut it down immediately, saying he wasn't interested and that he would handle the rest of the punishment himself. He added that he couldn't guarantee whether the demon lords would make it out alive. Hearing that, the succubus snapped back to reality a little. She reminded him that these were still lords of the Grand Tomb, and she'd been inside the place long enough to have authority too. She couldn't just let him do whatever he pleased. But Lin slowly turned toward her, eyes glowing a deep, sharp crimson. The sight made her tense up right away. Nervous but yielding, she told him to go ahead and do whatever he wanted with those filthy demon lords. Before slipping away, the succubus lady told Lin that since she was handing him this kind of authority, he'd better be ready to take responsibility for whatever he planned to do next. And with that warning, she vanished. The instant she disappeared, the haze of her hypnotic charm broke apart like shattered glass. The Snow Yeti Lord blinked himself awake, staring at the half-roasted Water Demon Lord and then at the spot where the succubus had been. He muttered in confusion, trying to figure out why the succubus lady had taken Lin's side of all people. The Water Demon Lord, groaning from the burns he'd collected, also dragged himself upright, clearly just as lost. Lin didn't bother clarifying anything. He looked at them with that bright crimson eye and told them with a smile that they didn't need to know what he'd done with the succubus lady. What they did need to think about, he said, was the exact moment they were going to die. The killing intent rolling off him was loud enough without words. He kept going, casually explaining that his life was about to get a whole lot easier. No more running, no more stress. He added that he'd turn the Water Demon clan into his daily breeding machinery and treat the entire snow field like his personal playground, collecting snow spirits and eating ice cream whenever he felt like it. The water demon lord, panicking, immediately tried to switch sides. He insisted he wanted to join Lin and help with whatever he was planning. But Lin wasn't even remotely convinced. With a flick of his hand, he ordered a hybrid goblin to move behind the water demon lord and slice him up like neat sushi strip. The hybrid obeyed without hesitation. Next was the snow yeti lord. He didn't even get to beg for mercy before another hybrid slammed him over the head, sending him screaming as blood sprayed across the ground. When both lords finally collapsed and lay there twitching, Lin just stared at them, breathing a little too hard, looking almost fascinated by the sight. After a second, he focused again and called over one of the hybrid. Lin sent him to the human empire to gather intel on the Holy Temple, repeating the order and reminding him that staying alive came first. Information wasn't worth anything if the scout died getting it. Then he turned to Gabu, asking if the 1,000 goblins he'd told her to select were prepared. Gabu immediately confirmed everything. All 1,000 were top-tier, fully developed, exactly what he'd asked for. Lin nodded and told her to bring them in because he had something important to announce. Soon enough, all 1,000 hybrid goblins gathered. Lin stood on a raised platform, looking over them. Most of these elite goblins had never even seen him in person before. He opened by asking if any of them knew who he actually was. Instantly, the whole crowd erupted, shouting his name and praising him like he was the greatest thing to ever happen to their species. Beside him, the Goblin Slayer woman stepped forward and casually mentioned that she already had all of them under control, no need for speeches or drilling ideologies into their heads. The way she said it surprised Lin. He hadn't expected things to be this smooth. Still, he laid out his instructions. He told the goblins he'd be taking them somewhere soon, and during the trip, they weren't to speak to anyone except him. No exceptions. The hypnotized soldiers nodded in complete agreement. When Lin turned away, he pulled Gabu aside and told her to train the goblins like crazy while he was gone. If the Holy Temple attacked, she was to prioritize survival and escape immediately. And if anyone from the flesh-eating Griffin clan came asking about him, she should say he'd gone out on a scouting mission. As he stepped closer, Gabu grew flustered but insisted she had everything covered. Lin nodded again, knowing exactly what was at stake. They had to prepare every trump card they could manage, against both the Holy Temple and the Grand Tomb. The Goblin tribe's future in the Grand Tomb depended on what they set up now. The final battle he'd been waiting for was no longer just a distant idea. It was almost here, finally taking shape right in front of him.